Business over drinks. Business over drinks. This is Dave and Tom. This is business over drinks.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Business Over Drinks. My name is Tung and I'm calling in from, today, KL.
Hey everybody, my name is David and I'm calling in from Australia. How you doing, everyone? Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on every channel there is because we exist everywhere. We're omnipresent. Is that the right word?
No, but anyway, so while Dave does his usual intro where everybody just feels really awkward for a second and people kind of just put it on mute, I'm going to just jump in and introduce our next guest. Our next guest is Yolanda Lee, who is the founder and CEO of Uncommon, which is Asia's first private leadership network for the next generation of female leaders. So both Dave and I cannot join, and I'm not saying that's unfair, but all right. Prior to this, she actually led the international consumer partnerships team across APAC and the Middle East at Deliveroo, which is kind of cool. She also built Deliveroo's corporate solutions offering as a head of business. And as you probably do know, I hope actually people who are listening know, Deliveroo is an online and food delivery company based across 200 cities globally. So before joining Deliveroo in Singapore, Yolanda worked in Africa as a regional partnerships manager for Uber and the regional managing director at HelloFood under Rocket Internet. Those who don't know Rocket Internet, that's all right. They're not that important. I'm kidding. They're extremely big entity, and they actually started a lot of these big companies that you're fully aware of now. Originally from Canada, Yolanda has lived and worked in every single continent with an exception for South America. And she counts Singapore, where she's currently based, as her 10th home. Wow, that's a lot. Yolanda, welcome to the show.
Woo! Woo! Thank you so much. Thanks for that intro and thanks for having me. It's great to be here with both of you.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Yolanda.
Yeah, we really
I'm surprised
appreciate
you're not
it.
in an airplane right now.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've been sort of grounded since COVID. I feel like I've lost my travel bug, maybe.
Oh, no, it's going to come back. 2023, I think, is when everyone's just going to keep on traveling for no reason.
I know, hopefully.
Ticket prices are going to come down. That's the guess that's going to happen.
Hopefully.
I really hope so.
Okay, before we go into it, Yolanda, what we normally do is we actually share what everyone's drinking. I'm going to let Dave go first. Do you want to tell us what you're drinking?
Yeah, definitely. So Jack Daniels have been kind enough to send us their new ready-to-drink range. So we have Jack Daniels Tennessee Apple Liqueur. Is that how you pronounce it? Liqueur. And man, it is manly. It is a manly tasting drink. It tastes like Jack Daniels, but with a bit of apple sprinkled on top of it. It's good. It's good. It's good for those who want a heavy night. So I don't know why I'm drinking it on a professional podcast tonight, but I'm enjoying it so far. I've had a few sips before this episode.
Yolanda, what about yourself? What are you drinking?
I am drinking a glass of red wine, keeping it classy. I actually don't. I think it's an Italian red. I just looked at a bottle I had downstairs and I didn't really clock exactly what it was, but it's nice. It was in the fridge actually, which is not kosher, but it was in the fridge. It was in the fridge because Singapore is so hot.
You should actually refrigerate your red wine.
Really?
In Asia, because it's so hot. Because room temperature in France in the mountains is about 16 degrees.
True.
So that's what they mean by keep your red at room temperature.
Oh, that's a good point.
I learned that from an Australian wine company who sent me a bottle with that written at the back. So it's not.
So it must be true.
It's not strong wine knowledge. It better be, because I've been telling everyone that. On my side, I'm drinking water. So because I'm traveling currently at the moment, and I'm in KL, and the Airbnb I'm staying in does not have any alcohol, but it did have a rack with wet sheets in the middle of the living room when I first came. So
what color were the sheets?
Not a great experience. Yellowish
brown?
stained.
Oh, yellow stained. Nice. My favorite
yellow
kind of
stained.
It's called authentic travel.
Yeah. Well,
you're finding yourself, man. You got to live rugged. You got to find this live, life, love. What is it? It's you, man.
Live, laugh,
eat, pray, love.
Something.
Eat, pray, love.
Well, to be fair, I'm staying in a luxury apartment in the heart of Bangsar and KL, so it's not exactly roughing it at the moment, but that was not a great experience. So, we don't want to take up too much of your time, Yolanda, because I know that you've got a really busy schedule. And so why don't we just jump straight into the questions? Dave, do you want to kick off the questions?
Yeah, so obviously from the intro, we know you've been around the place, but I'd love to know like your origin story. You know, what brought you from Canada all the way to sunny Singapore?
Yeah, happy to share. So, I'm born and raised in Toronto, Canada. So very very cold cold place.
Hmm.
I didn't travel very much growing up. I came from a really modest family. I flew on my first airplane when I was 11. And I remember when I first came home from that trip and I thought, I'm going to move abroad. And I didn't know anybody who had done it. I didn't have that, know how I was going to do it, but I just kind of had that conviction in me. And so when opportunities kind of came up and they did, or I created those opportunities, I just always said yes. I said yes to working in the music industry. So my first job outside of Canada was working as a production assistant for kind of a major label techno DJs. And I moved to London with them when I was still a teenager. Then I went back to university, studied in the UK. Then, then, at that time I thought I was going to like save the world. I thought I was going to like work for the World Bank or the UN or something like that. Did a lot of internships like across Europe, in France, in Geneva, in Brussels. But I think when I got on the ground in some of these like emerging markets, at the time I was in Kenya, I just saw like how actually technology was really what was driving a lot of changes. That there's a lot of really well-intentioned, organizations, but I really fell in love with technology as a force for driving positive change in the world. And so then when I kind of had this fork in the road where I was either going to become a management consultant working like making slides in London, or I was going to kind of go and build the first e-commerce companies in Nigeria and in Africa, I took the latter and said yes. So moved to Nigeria, then moved to Ghana and kind of worked across West Africa, building like the first food delivery players in those markets that are still running there now.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Were you offered that opportunity to go to Nigeria and Kenya, or was that something you just proactively just wanted? I'm going there.
I was doing grad school research in Kenya. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't know, but I just like kind of put my hand up to go. And then same thing with those jobs. I think a lot of people were afraid. I was always fascinated by places that have bad reputations, but not very many people have visited. And so I think a lot of Africa fits into that. I think people think that it's all like war torn and scary, but actually they're really exciting economies. And so I did sort of put my hand up to take those opportunities. Yeah.
That's so interesting, actually, because it's usually a challenge to kind of get people to take the off the beaten track, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going down something that's completely different. You don't have anything to kind of like that molded the way for you. So you're basically setting your own path. I think that's really fascinating. I actually have a question though, because it's a little bit off track, but you're taking, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a child of immigrants, right?
Yeah.
You're a child of immigrants, right? How did you first of all get your parents to reconcile with the fact that you weren't doing the traditional immigrant route?
That assumes that they reconciled with it.
Or if they haven't, how do you reconcile with their lack of reconciliation? No, because I'm technically a child of something, like I'm third generation. Dave is, actually I don't even know what Dave is, but most likely close to immigrant. He's
I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was about 10 years old.
Yeah, you're an immigrant, right? So how did that impact your choices, especially like when you were younger? Like, how did you kind of get to this current state?
Yeah. It's not easy. It's definitely a journey. I would say that firstly, there's a lot of internal pressure. I think when you're a kid of immigrant, you're in anything. I think definitely with that child of immigrant experience, and my parents are immigrants from Trinidad and Tobago, which is a little island off the coast of Venezuela. Mm-hmm. And and they came to Canada with nothing. They were very poor. They grew up in Canada. So it was actually my grandparents immigrated. And I think there's a lot of internal pressure you feel intrinsically to prove that that sacrifice was worth it. And I look
Yeah.
at the level of like social mobility in my family. Like I look at my grandmother. My grandmother was married when she was 16. She never learned to read and write. She had 11 kids. And then just kind of seeing those like steps in social mobility. And so you are kind of pushed down this path to be like a doctor or a lawyer. And, you know, my parents also sent me to like really these kind of elite private schools. And so there was this expectation that you would really like optimize for stability and choose one of these jobs. But what I always tell my parents, and I think they now are starting to understand it, is like the playbook that took them from point A to point B is very different from the playbook that's going to take me from point B to point C. And so that's kind of how I framed it. They weren't always on board with it, I would say, but now I think they kind of get it. They're really supportive of, you know, the calculated risks I've taken in my career, and also the ways in which I've still managed, I guess, to define my own success. I think the recipe for unhappiness is like trying to live your life by someone else's version of success. And I think it's something a lot of like kids of immigrants struggle with. But I think now that they're just really happy that I'm happy, even if they don't really understand what I do.
Okay, that's good. I mean, most immigrant parents are happy if you're successful. How you get there is actually maybe not as important
Yeah.
towards the end road.
I like how you
Uh,
said most immigrant parents are happy. That's a really doesn't seem true to me. Most of them don't smile.
They
They're happy.
they show their happiness by feeding you.
They're happy after the beating they give you. No, my
that
parents
is
are actually
true.
really
That
good.
is true.
Look, are you tired of struggling with design software?
Or hiring underwhelming designers.
Then it's time to try Yeti.
With Yeti, you can get top-notch design work without actually even lifting a finger.
You know, you just submit your brief and let a team of professional designers work their magic.
You know the best part? It won't break the bank, David. It's really,
I
really
can't believe you said
affordable.
break the bank. Anyway, so if you want to step up your branding game like a boss, like me in turn, give Yeti a shot.
Yeah, make sure that you go to our website, businessoverdrinks/offers, OFFERS, to see how it works.
Dude, it's .com/offers.
I don't care, man. businessoverdrinks.com/offers.
Trust us, you won't be disappointed.
Unless you actually don't like having a team of really talented designers doing your work for really free or cheap, not free, cheap, then maybe you will be disappointed. Who knows?
This is what you get when we have a scripted ad. But you know what it is. Yeti lets you have a team of talented designers for the cost of less than one. All right, that's pretty much what it does. Check it out. So if you need some professional level design work, but you don't want to pay an agency, you don't want to pay an overpriced person, businessoverdrinks.com/offers.
That's right. Make sure try Yeti now. Just go to our website, have a look, sign up through the link, guys. This will really help us out.
And the script says, you won't regret it, bro. That's right. You won't regret it, bro. And ma'am.
All right.
Yeah, you're right. I think you said a lot of good stuff there. I think a lot of us instinctively know what we need to be doing. And sometimes fear gets in the way and we end up doing something else because we're trying to make other people happy. So I love what you said just then. And reflecting on my life too, it's like I've noticed that the things I've done that were the scariest are things that have kind of been the most rewarding in my life. So back to the traveling, we have a lot of guests, lots and lots of guests who actually told us that traveling was probably the key thing that they did in the younger years that kind of influenced a lot of who they are today. So back to Kenya. How did you end up in Singapore? And then was it through the music industry or was it through something else?
No, at that point I was working for Uber and I came out to Singapore on a whim, actually. came for a visit. At that time at the company, you could kind of like go and help out other teams. And I just visited, and I fell in love with Singapore because of its and fell in love with Southeast Asia more broadly, actually, because I think it had a lot of the things I really loved about working in sub-Saharan Africa, which was like the massive potential. Building tech companies in those markets was so exciting. But on the flip side, the ecosystem was a little bit further ahead. There was more, VC money. There was more startups. There was just a little bit more happening than what existed in Africa. And for me, I had done 3-4 years in different parts of Africa. So from Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and then South Africa. And I didn't want to build my whole career there. I wanted to explore new regions, and Southeast Asia was just so excited. So when I got poached by Deliveroo, I moved over full time, and it's now been 7 years.
Okay, so that's usually the time limit before someone leaves and just leave Singapore.
Yeah,
that's usually how it is.
I know.
In relationships also, right? 7 years. What do they call
7
it?
years, a 7-year itch, right?
7-year itch.
Singapore.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, excellent. So then when you came to Singapore, right? How long was it before you actually set up Uncommon?
Years. So I moved to Singapore in at the end of 2015, and then I started Uncommon actually not initially as a business. It was a private dinner I was hosting once a month back in 2019. So I was doing that alongside my job at Deliveroo, and it was not even with the intention of kind of turning it into the network it is today. It was really actually for myself as a female leader, and I think as a leader in general. I think leadership is incredibly lonely, but I think it can be particularly lonely for female leaders because you get to a point in your career often where you're the only woman at the table, and you learn to carry yourself with a level of confidence in those rooms, but sometimes it can be a little bit daunting. And so I just started this dinner because I was hearing similar stories from women I knew in finance, in tech, and advertising. And I just thought, okay, we're going to have an Uncommon dinner. We're going to have no business card policy. We're going to have just real talk. And that was why it was called Uncommon. And so, yeah, it was really the momentum I saw behind those dinners, the way people were asking me for deeper coaching, the way they were asking for workshops, the way they really formed like lifelong friendships that that was sort of the impetus for me to start the business in 2021.
So
that's your... Oh, sorry, Dave. Karen.
Go ahead, man. Oh, good. You go first.
So that's really interesting for me, right? Because I think what you did was you organically built something. Once you saw traction, and once you saw the need for it, you built it, right? Maybe you can give me a little bit of insight, because I think what I really am trying to understand, for me, right, is what you're trying to what's the outcome for Uncommon?
Yeah.
What are you trying to achieve with it?
Yeah. So, for Uncommon, I really think of our outcome as transformation and really looking at it on multiple levels. So firstly, there's the individual. So I think we really help female leaders to feel more confident, to have clarity in their way forward, and also to have opportunities that they don't normally have access to. Then I think on kind of a company level, ultimately a market like Singapore, you have about a 50-50 split of male, female in professional jobs at entry level, but you're really at only 8% by the time you get to senior leadership. So how are we also changing who gets a share of the decisions that are made? Then we look kind of on a societal level. How does that change different roles? How does that change relationships? How does it also improve the lives of men as well, as we look kind of holistically? And then I think on a bigger picture, we're really advocating and changing the face of leadership itself, and changing what it means to be a leader, building skills that I think previously were not necessarily celebrated in the workplace, whether that's, vulnerability, whether that's empathy, whether that's collaboration, I think we're able, also to kind of on a larger scale transform what it means to be a leader.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous. As Tong was implying earlier, we would love to join that. So why do you feel that Uncommon needs to be exclusive to women? Because I get pretty lonely sometimes too.
I know,
So
and part of the reason I kept the name gender neutral is I think that is part of like the bigger picture. For me, we used to run Uncommon dinners with men as well back in the day. It was something we tested out. The reason why we started with women only was that it comes down to relevance. I think it's like the same way that, you might have a networking group for lawyers. There's certain experiences that women will really only open up about when they feel a sense of kind of safety in a group. And so we wanted to keep that relevance and that safety initially. But definitely, I completely agree with you. Like, men also really need a safe space to talk about the challenges, to talk about the loneliness, talk about how hard entrepreneurship can be. And so I definitely think like when I look at like our kind of longer term vision, I think that I will sort of bridge that gap. And that is something truly uncommon, is actually enabling people to also then have a dialogue across, different groups as well.
Men have Reddit, and that's how they get through a lot of these issues.
Yeah.
in the dark web.
Yeah, the dark web. Exactly.
Just a lot of shared sadness.
Yeah.
No, actually, this kind of ties in really good because really well into the next question that we have, because so there is a movement online towards disaffected young men.
Mhm.
There's multiple terms. It's like the red pill movement, pro masculine thing,
Yeah.
men's rights, all that stuff, right? It's a bit weird, to be honest, but like, they have their spokespersons that are like global phenomena now, right? Like, Andrew Tate and such. Like,
Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson is different in the sense that he's actually not trying to be the voice for disaffected young men. It's just that they happen to resonate most with his things. Andrew Tate is the one who comes out and specifically speaks to young men only. So there is a difference in that. But I mean, yeah, Jordan Peterson definitely is kind of like the one of the faces of it. Yeah. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you see that as kind of like, do you see that as an issue? Do you see that as just like, it's a stupid internet fad, or do you see this as something as this is actually a problem, B, we're not really going to the root of the issue?
Yeah, I think it's that latter point. I think this is a reaction to a problem that that is very real, and I think is very overlooked in our societies as well. I grew up with three brothers, so I can see the ways in which sometimes as women, I think we're allowed to feel the full spectrum of our emotions. We're allowed to show sadness. We're allowed to show that something's hurt us. I think sometimes as men, you're only really raised to show anger, or you're allowed to show anger. And I think that is kind of part of the problem of gender equality as well. Is like, I look at gender equality, these are two sides of the same coin. It's like looking at it holistically about the ways in which we also kind of fail men as a society as well. And that's not something that gets talked about as much. And I really see these movements as a reaction to that as well. I remember, for instance, at Uncommon, everybody talks about imposter syndrome for women, but I hosted like a male-female imposter syndrome, and we actually had more men attend than women, and it was eye-opening to see like how many men actually didn't have a space to talk about the ways in which they felt inadequate and to not feel judged for that. And I think that it's an interesting and a really crucial problem about how we have healthier conversations about masculinity, and build some movements around that as well. I definitely have compassion for men who fall into these movements, because I do sort of see it as a reaction. Yeah.
What is imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Where you're trying to, is it where you're trying to live up to expectations, or?
I think it's just the easiest definition of it is that you're always feeling like you're not enough. So you might get a promotion, but you don't feel like it's feeling like you're not good enough, essentially, for anything that comes your way, no matter how hard you've worked, no matter, what you've achieved, you just feel like like you don't deserve it. And it often gets talked about in the context of women, but I think it is a universal problem. But yeah.
Well, what do you
No,
so
it's
what?
it.
Yeah,
Sorry,
sorry.
Dave. Go ahead.
So, what do you think of someone like Andrew Tate specifically? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually am not super well versed on him, but I have like the kind of top line information. I do think that he is tapping into um, the a subset of men who feel misunderstood and who don't feel like they belong, don't feel like they're seen and heard. I think at the core, that's what everyone wants. And so that's why I try to see these men with compassion. But I think he is probably someone who maybe is capitalizing off of that and doing so, capitalizing off that fear and that loneliness to really drive it in a negative way. But I think that there's a lot of space for movements that tackle this challenge, but to do so in a positive way. And I really hope, and I know of a few, but I really hope that we see more of those kind of emerge as well.
Yeah, that's going to be tough because it's going to be tough to kind of compete against that, because what he says and what he does is really easy to scale, and people are more likely to listen to something that affirms their suspicions or their kind of their preconceptions of things.
Yeah,
right. So if
true.
you can offer them an easy explanation of why they're currently facing an issue, then that's what they'll believe. That's the likeliest thing that they'll believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to be fair, I find Andrew Tate exceedingly entertaining. I don't actually listen to his stuff in that same way that I take it as kind of like gospel, but it is very funny. But then I realize that I'm looking at it from a perspective of someone who doesn't have those same experiences to the people that he's talking to.
Yeah.
So I can see it for a humorous aspect of it. But yeah.
I'm not really like well versed on his content, unfortunately, but yeah. I just.
Oh, you will be now once the algorithm hits.
Yeah.
No, I think
a ton of content.
We can never agree with, like, there's no one person that we 100% agree with all the time, but we can pick and choose what we can learn from them. So Andrew, he's a wealthy person, fit. He's a winner in a lot of things that people like. And I think we can still learn from that, and from anyone, from a lot of people. So that's my 2 cents.
I understand. Yeah. I think it's also like, I will say this point is like, and I will always champion this, but I think we are learning to have, as a society, we've become increasingly divided, us versus them, these very extreme views on things. And one thing I personally work a lot on is like, actually, how do you get comfortable with difference? How do you actually still have a dialogue with someone who's different from you? And definitely there's like, places where you can't have a productive dialogue, but I think that it's important. It's increasingly important to be able to engage with people who have like different approaches to you, different worldviews, and not just like live in the eternal echo chamber.
Is that what you were thinking when you came onto a podcast and saw us?
Not at all. No. Not at all.
Oh, these dudes.
No, I mean, I genuinely like, and this is, from my experience of like living and working in so many different cultures, working with a lot of men, growing up with brothers, everything. I think that there is way more that we share in common as humans than what we have that divides us. I think all people want to be seen and heard. All people want to feel like they're safe, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally. All the basic human needs all kind of boil down to the same things. And so when I see, people behaving a certain way, I can usually boil it down to like, okay, this person, is feeling like they're lacking something, or they're feeling like they need to lash out in this way to, get their voice heard. Maybe they are sort of disenfranchised in some way. And so I think taking that perspective really helps me to definitely engage with a really diverse group of people as well.
Yeah, you're diverse, Tone.
I'm exceedingly diverse, man. I'm son of immigrant. So okay, let me just ask then some questions, because I think interesting enough, quite a few of our listeners are women, especially from all the comments we get from them telling us that we're not really good and we suck.
Oh no.
It's
your
well
mom.
written, so we know that from women. So can you just kind of give us a couple of like really easy tips, right? How would you deal with, like, based on your experience, both as an entrepreneur, as someone who's worked in multiple businesses across the world, as well as someone like you started Uncommon, right? And you've spoken to, I'm assuming, countless leaders, business leaders, people, owners, as well as people who work in companies, right? What tips would you give women who kind of want to start a business? How would you tell them to go about that?
Yeah. I would definitely say, first and foremost, there's a lot of that when you look at someone launch a business, you only see the tip of the iceberg. And that's not to scare anyone, but it's to have them understand that there's actually a lot of preliminary steps that you can do to de-risk a jump of starting a business. So for me, for instance, it was, I ran a dinner series for almost 2 years. I, built a bit of a community. I tested out formats. I got a lot of feedback. So by the time I actually quit my job and launched a business, I had a pretty strong validation of what I was doing. And so it doesn't, but people will only see that point. They don't necessarily see all of the micro steps that lead up to that. So I definitely think taking that time to test things out is really important. Secondly, I think that I see way too many founders, or would want to be founders, kind of getting stuck on the idea. And that can be really hard because maybe you're interested in a lot of things. I don't think, I think there were many different businesses I could have started. There were many different interest areas, many different problems I could have been motivated to solve. But I think definitely choosing a problem that you're motivated to solve helps, because on the days when entrepreneurship sucks, which is a lot of them, you're going to need something to motivate you. You're going to need something to get you out of bed. And it's not going to be dealing with the fires that you need to put out. So that is really important as well. And then, lastly, just leading with curiosity on finding that idea. I think for me, it was a curiosity, and I followed that curiosity forward. It wasn't necessarily a perfect business. I don't even think I've ever written a business plan. It wasn't some perfectly constructed business plan that I put together. It was really a hunch that turned into something bigger and bigger and bigger, and continues to grow from there.
You're absolutely right. Like, do you have a business plan, Tone?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do? Oh,
I don't know where it is, but we did a business plan. And
I remember doing one just for investors. That's it. We never had one at the start. We just did it. Just was one nighter.
Yeah.
Pull it out after 2 years of business. Just made up a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. But, I have like a deck and stuff, but like I never, in the early days, I just thought like getting it out there and testing it was the best learning that I could have.
Yeah, no. So my business plan actually came in, I think, 1.5 years into the business. I actually sat with a business consultant, and then we kind of fleshed it out on a whiteboard, and then built a business plan from that.
Oh, cool.
And then we
used pieces of it. Yeah, we used pieces of that. I paid him in alcohol because he was a friend of mine.
Was he on the podcast?
I couldn't afford. I couldn't afford. He has been on the podcast, I think. Episode 3, I think. Yin was on the podcast, I think. Yeah.
Oh, him. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Our podcast with him was about traveling. Quick side note.
Yes.
Anyway,
nothing about
so
that.
Uncommon and leadership. Like you're obviously a natural born leader. What do you have any tips on what it makes to be a good leader?
I do. I think everyone has their personal style, but I really think, some of the skills that really make a great leader are often overlooked. Firstly, I would say they tend to be the soft skills, but sometimes it's not very soft to build these skills. I definitely think that the ability to build trust amongst a team is really key. And not just team, build trust with stakeholders, build a culture of trust on your team. That's really important. I think being able to see the forest from the trees, um, and then translate that to your team as sort of priorities and goals that they need to be working towards. And in a startup, that's hard because it can feel like there's 5,000 priorities. But I really believe, one tactic we use at Uncommon is, for instance, like having thinking of everything in terms of the return on effort. Like, we have limited resource on the team, and everything needs to yield kind of a strong yield the highest return on effort, and that's something we use to kind of prioritize amongst the team as well. Other things I think that kind of get overlooked are, driving collaboration and cohesion on the team. Leaders that are able to have the really tough conversations and take tough decisions. I think having the tough conversations is a prerequisite. It can preemptively avoid taking tough decisions. Like, sometimes if you have those tough conversations, like, oh, maybe traction isn't going the direction we think it needs to be going. How can we course correct? Those tough conversations earlier can actually save you from like a tough decision, like laying off half your team. So I think that is really important. And also the ability to ask for help. That's really key, particularly in a startup founder who can't necessarily do everything themselves, but can really ask others for help, whether that's investors, advisors, friends, partners, team members.
I like what you said about making the tough decisions. Like, I mean, it can be very tempting. I'm definite victim of. I'm not a victim of this. I'm definitely guilty of this. Of keeping a bad seed in the company.
There's always a victim, unfortunately.
That's when I get caught out, I always say I'm a victim. But no, seriously, though, like keeping a bad seed in the company, it is such a hard decision to get rid of it, right? But then it can save you and maybe other jobs in the future if you just make that swift choice.
Yeah, exactly. But it's hard. It's hard sometimes because you can. Sometimes I find with founders, like, part of what makes a great founder is someone who can see a situation and then see the potential. But also with people on the team or situations, sometimes you don't need to see the potential. You need to see what they're actually doing right now, and if that's really what your business needs. And I think that can be really hard. Sometimes I think founders need to be out of the hiring process sometimes.
Oh yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. I can't. I'm still involved in the hiring process, but I kind of removed myself from making 100% of the decision, because I have a history of hiring people based on, characteristics that fit into the company culture. The reason that I took myself out of it, because I would always hire people based on, the potential that I think that they would fit within the company culture, right? Because we can teach skill sets, you can teach a bunch of different things. But my issue is that I always looked at it from my personal lens, where maybe I'm generalizing a little bit, but I tend to gravitate towards people who have specific, I would say, unique and different characteristics. So, like, bit odd, a bit weird. I'm just gonna be very frank. A bit odd and a bit weird. I find them fascinating, and I think that they fit really well within a lot of things. You can find diamonds in the rough, but for the most part, you find people who are not suited for working in a proper corporate culture, right? So we found a few diamonds in the rough. People who've been really good, people who lasted really long, worked with us almost since day one, and then you find people who couldn't last like 2 weeks. Like, I mean, for example, I hired someone who it was an intern, and it was like, oh, cool, right? You come in for 3 months, 6 months, you kind of learn a lot. You're a sponge and you work hard, but then we'll teach you everything we can, right? So it's a give and take. They wanted a sabbatical. An intern asked for a sabbatical after 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't sit on that call. I still remember being in that call and staring at the screen, going like, I'm like, what do you mean? I asked the question, what do you mean by sabbatical? So
Is it paid?
I was like, do you know what sabbatical means? Like, it was the weirdest conversation I ever had with someone. And then that was actually the start of me changing the interview process and the hiring process to take me out of that conversation, because I'm like, I can't be the person making this decision, because I'm not the right person.
Yeah.
They don't actually work with me most of the time. They work with the rest of the team. I'm not involved in every single aspect of day to day, right? So it became this really weird conversation where sometimes like people are joining and I don't really know them that well, and the company's not big. We're quite a small company, but it became an interesting thing. But I think it's very important, because I needed to like divorce myself from that entire process, like you mentioned. Otherwise, it's just gonna be really weird.
It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to, I think, let go as a founder too, in some ways.
Yeah, no, you. I don't think I'll ever be able to let go, to be honest. But I'm trying my best to let go a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're cognizant of your time, so maybe we should ask you a last couple of questions. Dave, you wanna step in?
Just a quick one, because my wife and I have had some discussions about having kids, and having a kid will definitely take her off a few years of work if she wants to be a great mum. And motherhood for leaders. Let's say you're a new mum, you have a newborn. How do you stay? Could you stay, or should you stay being a leader while being a mum of a newborn child? What's your take on that?
Yeah.
And do you have any tips?
Yeah, I think I'm not a mother, so I can't necessarily speak from personal experience on this. But we have a lot of members who are navigating this. It's a subject that comes up a lot for us at Uncommon. I think that it's a very personal decision. I would never shame a woman for like making that decision. My own mother had 4 kids. She, was very career oriented, had 4 kids, then kind of now runs a thriving Airbnb business. So I think it is very personal on that. What I can say is that I see the question more as like a question for families. I think, the women that I see really doing it well, having a career, having a family. It's also that, childcare isn't just on them, and their partner also, sees it as kind of something that they're also leaning into. Obviously, in the beginning, there's some biological, necessities, but I definitely see a lot of different models for that. I see that, choosing a partner who also wants to support your career, who also, wants, and the flip side of that coin is also wants to be engaged in parenting as well. I think that is probably the best outcome for working women. I think that if they can be supported both by their workplaces and by their partners, and there are many cases of women who can do both. That being said, one thing that we talk a lot about at Uncommon is like there are trade-offs. Like you can either be at that board meeting or be at your kid's school play, and you can't be at 100% of the things. And every single choice, there are so many choices, and you just have to make the choices that are right for you. And so some people think that, hey, I'm going to like spend a lot of quality time with my kids in these things, but it means I'm going to miss like school pickup some days, but I'm going to, make up for that in other ways. So I think it comes down to the individual and finding those choices that work for them. And I think at Uncommon, we really help people. There's no one size fits all. We help people really figure out what those values are, what's important to them, and then also make the individual choices that enable you to kind of live aligned to those values.
Yeah.
So, okay. No, but see, that's an interesting concept, and that's an interesting way of looking at things, because at least from my perspective, right? When we when I look at stuff like that, and when we try and look at things from, how do we, because I'm just playing devil's advocate here, right? When we're looking at things from um you know balancing whether, motherhood, and then whether you want to let's just say parenthood for now, right? Parenthood, and then doing your own job, right? How do you reconcile between being able to provide everything that you can? Because like when we grew up, there was a really defined parental roles, right? Your mom stayed at home, your dad was the one who worked and was a breadwinner. Then for most of your life, like most of you when you're growing up, you saw your dad on weekends and then holidays. That was it. Yeah. um, in today's modern society, right, how do you reconcile like where you can do the same thing, where like now both parties have to work, but then how are we reducing the quality time that you spend with your child, because both parties are working? So it's not just like, women who want to be mothers, but it's also parents now, paternity leave, and then you also have a role in raising a child. How do you, like, I'm asking because I'm just curious on my side, right? How do people reconcile that fact? Because you have to, like you mentioned, you have to sacrifice something. But if both parties are working, and with the economy, with the recession coming, with a bunch of different things going on, where most families, you need a two-person income to actually have
Just to pay rent.
Just to pay rent.
Just to survive.
Rent. Yeah. Raising a kid's expensive, like medical fees and stuff like that, right? And then in a lot of places, say just outside of Southeast Asia, getting external help is crazy expensive. Like having a live-in helper in Southeast Asia is common. Outside of Southeast
Australia,
Asia,
it's
and like
almost impossible. You need to be very wealthy.
Yeah, exactly. You got to have a butler. It's different, right?
That's my life goal.
No, but so
anyway,
Solana, sorry, this is less of a question and just more of me musing around that, because your perspective is very interesting. But I always thought about it, because I was thinking, it's, to some extent, to me at least, it doesn't make sense unless you're willing to sacrifice a lot of stuff to actually have a child, as like, when you're working, and when you're trying to build your career, and when you're trying to like earn enough so that you don't have to worry too much when you're older.
No, it's a good point. And I think it's one that families have to make. Like I can see, at Uncommon that we have, I think there are like bigger questions. I think families are going through those questions. Companies are going through those questions. Governments are going through those questions on, okay, how do you regulate parental leave in a way that then as a family you can decide, okay, I know, like, for instance, Scandinavian countries have, like, you as a couple get collectively X amount of days, and you can use them interchangeably between the two parents. So then collectively you have a lot of time off together, and you can kind of get kids to a level where then they're in school a lot. I do remember reading something, I think it was in like Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, but it was all about like actually child development and child development outcomes and participation, and like the idea that actually one of the biggest like drivers for early childhood development is actually that you have a father involved as well. So that idea of like co-parenting actually delivering better development outcomes. And so I think that that's maybe where the things are shifting. Like you can still have, grandparents involved in some way. You can still have, it takes a village to raise a kid. And so whether that's a combination in Southeast Asia of like a helper, grandparents, your friends in your community, your, the schools they go to, and you as parents, I think that that's kind of the model that is evolving in some ways. But definitely is so intrinsic. Like there's something so personal about the family. and the things that are normalized for us in families, differ very much across different cultures, across individuals as well. And so just enabling people to have the tools and the support to kind of choose what works best for their families, I think is what we'd like.
Okay,
Oh,
no, that's fair enough.
This may
Sorry,
sound
Davey,
bad, but I think Tung may be able to relate to this. But I didn't grow up with much money. My dad was away a lot of the time, and I have friends who are now very successful who didn't have the best childhood ever, but that made them very hungry and kind of angry in a positive way, like channeled that kind of struggle into a positive way and built a great life. I mean, on the surface at least, for themselves. And maybe the key is to kind of neglect your kid a bit. Don't listen to me, anyone. Don't follow it. But maybe it is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Especially as kids of immigrants, we can probably relate to that to some extent, right? Like dad's rarely home. But then we kind of made the most of it. And we were kind of jealous of the kids who were doing really, who had everything. And we just worked extra hard. And we built a life for ourselves that are pretty decent right now.
Yeah. I remember looking at a stat, actually. I forget it off the top of my head, but essentially like that, at least for girl children whose mothers work, they end up earning something like 25% more money in their careers later on. So in a way, it's sort of an investment in your child's future, as well as if you have a mother who works, you're probably going to earn more money because you're going to see that as a model, and you're going to probably strive.
Oh, I thought that was an abandonment issue.
One of our kids, some of our listeners that are listening right now taking notes, neglect my child.
I would put that back on you.
Yolanda says neglect.
No, but I would put that back on you because, why do you see it as an abandonment if it's a mother working, but it's not abandonment if it's a father working? And so I think that also calling into question that element of is it actually a mother's solely a mother's role to kind of raise children? Or, I can think of a number of examples of, I have a friend who's a partner at Goldman Sachs. They obviously make enough money. Her husband doesn't have to work. And I think, again, coming back to the family unit, they made the decision that he would actually be at home with the kids, kind of managing all of that. So I think that those things can be interchangeable. And if a family has a female breadwinner, as more and more families do, than ever in history, then, it's also about making those decisions for you as a family on who's going to be that primary caregiver.
I think for us, for abandonment, I think it'd be on both sides.
It's about your
from your father. Just in general, man. My mom wasn't the most attentive person in the world when we were growing up.
I hope she won't be listening.
I didn't have bad parents, but my mom wasn't the most attentive. My dad forgot our names on and off, so that was always an interesting thing. No, I'm joking. He called us 1, 2, 3 because he had 3 kids. So no, I'm joking. He's probably gonna listen to this and get angry.
I have some family friends. Single mom raised 3 kids, and she had to work 2 jobs. And the 3 kids have grown up amazing. Like one is doing really well in her career. Like all of them are doing really well. So I guess it sounds bad, but quality time may just be quality time. It doesn't need to be ever present.
Yeah.
But it may, maybe there's a gift with struggling.
I think it's about defining, exactly, what is that quality time? Is picking your kids up from school that important? Or is it that you're spending time with them on the weekend, helping them decide, what they want, what courses they want to choose, or who they want to be in the world, and helping them kind of feel empowered in that. I think that there's different ways that you can kind of, is it going through the day-to-day tasks? Is that actually what kids need? I don't know. I'm not a child development expert.
Or your kids seeing your mom saying, my mom's a leader. She is awesome. I want to be just like her. But I'm not a parent yet, so I can't really.
Me neither.
Yeah.
We're a bunch of I don't know if any of you have children, but I don't. So I can't really comment from.
I'm pretty sure I don't have kids.
Yeah.
Tung and I may, but we don't. We refuse to acknowledge them.
They're gonna come on the show.
It is
They're gonna
good
come
for
on
their
the
learning.
show.
We have to cut that out as well, man. What the hell? Uh, no, so Yolanda, I think we're coming short on time. So we usually ask this question to everyone. So could you just give us your three books that you think people should read because they influence you the most?
Yeah,
Do you have three books?
definitely. Yeah, I do. So the first one I read when I was, a teenager. I've come back to it many times. It's a novel, it's The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. Love it.
Oh,
I
okay.
love it for its themes of, it really gave me its themes of both lightness and heaviness. Lightness being the things in your life that kind of give it a bit of excitement. You're not necessarily rooted to anything. It's kind of that free spirited side. But like with too much lightness, you kind of aren't grounded and you float up to the sun. And then it has themes of heaviness, like the things that are really important, your family, your job, your home. But then, too much stress with those things can actually like crush you and burden you. And I always think about in my life, like these themes of feeling grounded, but also having freedom. And so that's one of them that's really influenced me. I love Chimamanda Adichie's book, which is a tiny book. I gave it to all my brothers for Christmas last year, called "We Should All Be Feminists." All about why both for men and women there are there's power in gender equality. There's positive outcomes for both men and women in gender equality. And then I recently also I obviously read a lot of books on this subject, but I recently visited the British Museum and to see all their stolen goods from around the world. But saw a fantastic exhibition on sort of female deities and like these archetypes of like, witches and evil women and seductresses and like these throughout mythology across different cultures. And so there was a book that went along with that called Women in Power, a manifesto by Mary Beard. Those are the three books that are top of mind for me at the moment.
That We Should All Be Feminists sounds interesting.
It is. It's really interesting. It's actually based off of a TED Talk that she did. And then it's a really small, thin book. And yeah, really, really love it. Great stocking stuffer for Christmas.
Okay. Mindful of your time. Last question. What are three major lessons you've learnt in business in your years of doing it?
Yeah. The first would be prioritization matters. So that's where that return on effort and always working smart and hard, but really working smart being key. Also that people matter. Whether that's your team, whether that's your clients, whether that's your investors, just really investing in those relationships with people as well. And then for me personally, that purpose matters, that I'm really driven by, having a higher purpose, by having that impact. That's what gets me up every day in the morning, and being able to also help people figure out what that purpose is for themselves is also really exciting and part of the work we do at Uncommon as well.
Speaking of Uncommon, how can people find out more about Uncommon?
People can find us on all the socials, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram at Hey Uncommon. Our website is www.heyuncommon.com. We invite all leaders who, feel a little lost in their journey, feel a little lonely, to apply to Uncommon on our website.
We'll also link to those in our show notes for anyone who missed what Yolanda just said. Just go to businessoverdrinks.com and then you'll be able to see the right links in there.
Great. Thank you so much.
Look, are you tired of struggling with design software?
Or hiring underwhelming designers?
Then it's time to try Yeti.
With Yeti, you can get top-notch design work without actually even lifting a finger.
You just submit your brief and let a team of professional designers work their magic.
You know the best part? It won't break the bank, David. It's really, really affordable.
Break the bank. Anyway, so if you want to step up your branding game like a boss, Like me and Tung, give .yeti a shot.
Yeah, make sure that you go to our website, businessoverdrinks/offers, OFFERS, to see how it works.
Dude, it's .com/offers.
I don't care, man. businessoverdrinks.com/offers.
Trust us, you won't be disappointed.
Unless you actually don't like having a team of really talented designers doing your work for really free or cheap, not free, cheap, then maybe you will be disappointed. Who knows?
This is what you get when we have a scripted ad. But you know what it is. .yeti lets you have a team of talented designers for the cost of less than one. All right, that's pretty much what it does. Check it out. So if you need some professional level design work, but you don't want to pay an agency, you don't want to pay an overpriced person, businessoverdrinks.com/offers.
That's right. Make sure try .yeti now. Just go to our website, have a look, sign up through the link, guys. This will really help us out.
And the script says, you won't regret it, bro. That's right. You won't regret it, bro. And ma'am.
All right.